Hi, my name is Wade Wilson. I want to welcome you to HeartWise, the natural way to manage heart health. Um, Probably the best place for me to begin is what I consider the beginning of my journey. Uh, at the age of 44, I was very active. I exercised 6, sometimes 7 days a week, both lifting weights and doing a lot of cardio. I was in excellent shape physically. Um, I ate is considered to be a heart healthy diet. Uh, a diet that is the age of 44. I was exercising 6, sometimes 7 days a week. I was active. I was physically active almost every day. Exercising, both lifting weights and doing a lot of cardio, played basketball, played flag football, stuff like that. Just the things that most people would consider to be very active for the age of 44 years old. I ate a very low fat diet, what they consider a heart healthy diet. Um, I had read a book back when in my early 30s called Body for Life by Bill Phillips. It was really a phenomenal program where I spent, like I say, virtually every day with some form of exercise. Uh, the diet was eating 6 meals a day, eating low fat foods, and really restricting my fat intake. For breakfast, a lot of times I would eat a slice of toast with a couple of egg whites. That would be my entire breakfast. For lunch, a lot of times I'd eat, if you're familiar with Schlotzsky's, I'd eat the turkey wrap, which is basically a couple of slices of turkey meat with some lettuce and some greens and a whole wheat tortilla. Um, Things of that nature was my diet. Most of the time, I was eating a carbohydrate that was about the size of my palm. I'm sorry, a piece of protein about the size of my palm, and a carbohydrate that was no bigger than my fist. And I had done that for 10 years. I was just the model of good heart health. And all of a sudden, I started experiencing what is called angina. Angina is pressure, or some people describe it as pain in the chest. Angina can be an experience that comes and goes. It's a lot of times feels like a shortness of breath. If you're reading this, if you're here for the first time, you may have just experienced this, or maybe you've been experiencing it. Angina is a very common issue leading up to heart problems. When I started experiencing the angina, I'd start working out, and the pressure on my chest would build, and I'd get short of breath. And so I tried, kind of slowing down and working my way through it. At the same time, I also recognized that it had something to do with my diet. So I started trying to change my diet a little to see if I could bring about some changes in the way I felt. But as time went on, the angina kept getting worse and worse and worse. Angina is a pressure on the chest. Some people describe it as pain, where literally the flow of blood is being cut off going to the heart. It's a very common issue, or it's being restricted flowing out of the heart into a part of the body. Let me stop and just say that if you are experiencing angina, you should go see a medical professional about it. I'm not here to replace your medical professional. In fact, I have great respect for the medical profession. However, the goal here is for you to learn how to live your life medication free, and hopefully get to the point where you can eat and live your life in a good quality life that allows you to do it in such a way that you feel good all the time. if you're experiencing the symptoms of angina, shortness of breath, literally the point that I made the decision that I needed to go to the doctor was when literally I was on the floor expecting my heart to explode. If you're experiencing angina, let me just say this. It's important that you see your medical professional as soon as possible. It's not something to play with. You must know exactly what's happening before you can treat the problem instead of just treating the symptoms. So let me get into explaining how I've come to the conclusions that I've come to. At the age of 44, I was in excellent shape. I exercised 6, 7 days a week. It was uncommon that I wouldn't, exercise the full 7 days a week. I both lifted weights and I did cardio. Exercise was natural. It just came natural to me. And it was something that I'd been doing for a long, long time. As a result of that, I thought I was in really good condition. My diet was what they consider a heart healthy diet. I ate 6 meals a day, ate a low fat diet. If you're familiar or look it up, you can look it up. There's a book called Body for Life by Bill Phillips that teaches how to eat a heart healthy diet, how to eat a low fat diet, and then how to exercise. And that's essentially what I was following. Even though I was following all that and everything was going good, I started to experience angina. I started experiencing it when I would start my workouts. A lot of times I'd get short of breath. It felt like somebody was grabbing me around the chest and just squeezing. It wasn't painful, but I just felt very short of breath, and it felt like there was this big pressure in my chest. It kept getting worse and worse. I would try to work my way through it, ease into my exercising. And a lot of times that would help, that would work, and pretty soon I could get my heart rate up and everything was fine. But the problem just got persistently worse until one day, literally, and I wasn't exercising, I was literally walking from one end of the house to the other. And all of a sudden the angina hit me so bad that I had to lay down where I was at. I felt like my heart was going to just burst out of my chest. It was everything that they explain or tell us that experiencing heart attack it was very much like that. I laid there for some time, and pretty soon the thing that triggered me to start thinking about this is that I'm deathly allergic to bees. And while I'm having this episode with angina, I realized that I felt like I was having an allergic reaction. And being allergic to bee stings, one of the reactions that I have is that if I get stung by a bee in certain parts of my body, I would literally have to. My involuntary reaction is to vomit. It's like get the poison out of my system, purge my system of the poison, and so I'm laying there with angina, and I started realizing that I was having an allergic reaction. So I literally made my way to the bathroom and stuck my finger down my throat and made myself vomit. Within 5-10 minutes, everything had subsided. I felt good. I felt better, but I knew that there was a serious problem. So the next morning, it was a Sunday night. The next morning, I made an appointment to see a doctor. He sent me to a cardiologist, which they got me in the same day, kind of unusual. Went and saw the cardiologist, Initially, they scheduled me for so initially the the cardiologist was going to schedule me for a stress test to see if my heart, how my heart was responding to physical stress. However, the thing about it is that I'd been putting myself under a stress test for weeks. Actually, it had been months that I'd been experiencing the angina, and it just progressively gotten worse. So he immediately canceled the stress test and said that they wanted to do a heart catheterization procedure, which is designed to, where they go in through the groin, or nowadays they're going in through the wrist, and they go in with a scope and look at what's going on inside of you. When they got in with the heart catheterization, they discovered that I had 97% blockage of an artery that runs across the heart. The interesting thing is that, most cases they would just simply put in a stent. In most cases, they would just simply put in a stent and everything would be fine. However, because of the location of the blockage, it was right there. There's an artery that crosses the face of the heart, and the blockage was right where the artery split, and it branched off. And they said that if they put a stent in on the block side, the stent would actually block the side that was flowing good already. So they ended up going in and doing a double bypass with 97% blockage. Coming out of that experience, sitting in the hospital, looking at a big slash that they made down my chest, I started thinking about what I might have done wrong. And while I was thinking about that, they sent in a nutritionist to tell me how I was supposed to eat. And the interesting thing is that she came in, and the first thing that she said was, "Well, sir, you're going to have to stop eating French fries." The funny thing is I hadn't eaten a handful of French fries in 10 years total. And I explained that to her. I said, "Lady, I haven't eaten hardly a French fry in 10 years. And she goes, "You're kidding me." And I said, "No, very, very unusual for me to eat French fries." And it would be one or two, off of my kids' plates at that time. And so she started down this list of don'ts, don't eat these foods. And then she said, and then as she was going down that list, I was saying, "I don't eat that. I don't eat that. I don't eat that." And then she started down the list of do's. And, one of the first things she said is don't eat eggs with egg yolks, but just eat egg whites. And I said, that's all I eat is egg whites. And so on and so forth, going down the list of things that I should eat. I think it was even before we got done with the two lists, she looked at me and she said, "If you're eating this way, how come you ended up here?" I said, "That's a very good question." So I started doing my own research. I got home. I had plenty of time on my hands. They said I was going back to work for 6 weeks, that I couldn't drive for 6 weeks. So I was sitting at home doing nothing. And so I started Googling, as many of us do. And the interesting thing about my Googling is that it came across some very interesting information about heart disease. One of the most impactful documents that I came across was a book that was written by a scientist by the name of Linus Pauling. Him and another doctor had been studying the effects of foods in heart disease, but they had specifically gone and looked at heart disease in various animals. looking at mammals, of course, looking at, how heart disease would affect, um, cows versus uh, carnivores, such as large cats, lions, tigers, things like that. They eventually discovered that one of the interesting places that they landed was on polar bears. And what they discovered was that polar bears, while they do not have much heart disease, they do have real high vitamin C in their blood. However, they don't eat foods that are high in vitamin C. Their diet primarily is seals and fish. Anyways, long story short is that what they discovered is that polar bears have very low heart disease, very little signs of heart disease. One of the things that they discovered is that their blood showed very low cholesterol levels of bad cholesterol, while they had very high levels of good cholesterol. And they had very low triglycerides. And of course, that mixture, the triglycerides and bad cholesterol, is what doctors today say is the major problem, major cause of blockage of the heart. Combining that with my own diet, what I realized was, looking at and studying medications and stuff, and how the effects that they were having on me, was the big issue was medications. Medications, typically, heart disease medications such as cholesterol medications, statins. The first thing that a doctor wants to do is prescribe medications that are heart related. What they say will treat heart disease. However, they treat the symptoms and not the problems. Statins, while they lower cholesterol, most generally what they do is they lower both good and bad cholesterol, to bring the cholesterol level down. Blood pressure medications. Blood pressure medications are designed to, and by the way, most of the blood pressure medications that they use are venom from snakes. I don't know if you knew that. The problem is that it's just treating the symptom, actually not treating the problem itself. Blood thinners. There's issues with blood thinners. But one thing that all three of these have in common is that they will all affect your memory. They talk about the huge spike that they've seen over the last 30 to 40 years in Alzheimer's and dementia. And I believe that a lot of that can be contributed to heart disease medications. It was really difficult for me to assess how my body was reacting to things if I was on the medications. Not only did I not like the side effects that I was experiencing from the medications. To give you an example, one of the things that I started experiencing was that my legs would just, have you ever been so cold that you just felt like your bones ached? That's how I felt. I'd be in a room 75 degrees, and my legs would ache like they ached like I was out in cold weather, and I was so cold that my bones would ache. And that's the way it felt. And I felt like I was losing functionality of my muscles in my legs. And I know that was a direct effect from statins. And that's one of the side effects that I discovered that was, spoken of in their literature. Lipitor is notorious for that very thing. And so are some of the others that I've read about. So I went to my doctor and I told him, first of all, him and I had many conversations because I was in such good condition, good physical condition, that he was kind of like, I'm not sure why you're in here. If you're in such good physical condition, what is causing this? And so I went to him and I said, I really think I can figure this out, but I'm going to have to be medication free because the medications just mask the symptoms. Whereas when I'm medication free, I can see what the symptoms are. So he allowed me to wean myself back off the medications, which I hadn't been on them for a long time. I'd only been on them for about 8 weeks at that point in time. So I started weaning myself off the medications, and I started really focusing on my diet because I knew it had to be diet related. So initially what we discovered is that through diet, I was able to reduce my bad cholesterol, was able to increase my good cholesterol, my blood pressure stabilized, everything looked good. And my doctor was very impressed for about 6 months. And I was going in about once every 30 to 45 days to have blood tests run. Everything was looking really good until all of a sudden I started to see a change in, first of all, my blood pressure, which I was checking at least twice a day, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day at that time. That was the first sign that I saw that there was a change. And then the second thing is that when we started testing my blood for cholesterol and triglycerides, both the bad cholesterol was higher and the triglycerides had gone back up, but the good cholesterol had gone down, which over that 6-month period, we had seen just the opposite effect. My doctor had suggested that maybe I should go back on the medications. My appointment that week was on a Friday afternoon. We had a conversation about it. He wrote me out prescriptions, which I never went and filled. I went home Friday night and I was really discouraged because I had seen such great advances in my health, and then all of a sudden I had seen a decline. I decided that I would wait until Monday to fill the prescriptions. I don't know why Monday was that particular day, but maybe it was God's plan. Friday night, I just went ahead and ate the usual diet. Saturday, I ate the usual diet. Sunday, I ate breakfast. Again, 6 meals a day. I would eat my breakfast. For breakfast that morning, I had a bowl of raisin bran and 2 egg whites. I went to church, and while I was at church, I started praying. Actually, it was during a prayer time for the leadership of the church. I started praying for myself, and I was having a conversation with God, and I was saying, God, I'm so frustrated. Please, I'm just asking you to give me wisdom. And at that point in time, I had a vision flashback of the day that I had the really bad angina, walking from one side of the house to the other. That day, for breakfast, my meal consisted of raisin bran and egg whites, 2 egg whites. My mid-morning meal, which was very typical for me, was an energy bar. Then for lunch, I remember, and it was a result of this vision that my memory was so clear, that I went to Schlotzsky's with my family, and while at Schlotzsky's, I ate that turkey wrap, which is considered very heart healthy. It's turkey, meat, some greens, lettuce, I don't know what all's in it, but and a flour tortilla. My mid-afternoon meal consisted of a protein shake that, one of these that you pop the top off of and you drink. Then for dinner, I had chicken and a baked potato, which I had learned to eat the baked potato without butter. I'd eat it with sour cream, hoping that I was keeping it very low fat. The interesting thing about that exact day is at about 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, I started to get hungry. So I thought I'd just eat something that I felt like at the time would be a good choice for kind of a substitute for eating candy bar or something like that, which included another bowl of Raisin Bran. Within 10 minutes of eating that Raisin Bran is when I experienced that angina so seriously that I literally thought my heart was going to burst out of my chest. This all came to me in this vision that I had while I'm sitting at church that morning during that prayer time. That afternoon, after church, I went home and spent a couple more hours on the internet Googling. And I came across some interesting facts. One was the word angioedema. Angioedema, and I am just ad-libbing. I'm not sitting here reading from the computer or from a script or anything. But angioedema is an allergic reaction that's typically described on the surface as being hives. People commonly have hives. They have those breakouts where they're having an allergic reaction, and it ends up being a kind of a lumpy feel, or sometimes it can almost look like acne on the face or around the body. That's angioedema. The interesting thing about the word angioedema is how similar it is to angina. There had to have been a connection. Here's where I found the connection is that angioedema, while it can be and typically is known as a surface of the skin type of an allergic reaction, it can also be any place inside your body, including, inside your organs. Going back to Linus Pauling and his studies, what they discovered was that in studying vitamin C and studying mammals and everything is that when people would experience the raising of cholesterol, bad cholesterol, and the raising of triglycerides, it was being caused by a leakage of the heart vessels, the your veins and arteries. And so what they discovered is that when your heart vessels were leaking, your body would produce bad cholesterol and triglycerides, which would end up mixing in the bloodstream to create that what we know as plaque buildup within the arteries. The body sends it out kind of like a Band-Aid to fill if you're having an allergic reaction or having that issue of leaking arteries. It sends it out as kind of as a Band-Aid to lay over and stop the leakage. The interesting thing about angioedema is that it also is described as a leakage of the blood vessels. And typically what's happening is your body is sending out white blood cells into that area. And in order to extract them and make them available to treat the place that's having the allergic reaction, it has to somewhat cause a leakage of the blood vessels in order for the white blood cells to get directly to that area that's having the reaction. Now, what I believe was happening, and this was as a result of my experience of the angina that day when it was so terrible that I was laying on the floor with my chest about to jump out of my heart, about to jump out of my chest is that what I believe was happening is that I was having an allergic reaction, which had been triggered by the Raisin Bran. And I was having that allergic reaction. That's why when I finally stuck my finger down my throat and vomited, within minutes, I was back to normal. I stopped experiencing that reaction that I was having. But at the same time, what it was causing is there was some place in my body that I was experiencing that allergic reaction, which wasn't on the surface of the skin. It was inside someplace close to my heart, because that's where the artery was that they found the blockage, is that I was leaking from that artery, and therefore my body had to send out what it thought was a protection, but eventually it would cause problems because it would literally block my artery to the point of 97%. That all being said, I started looking at the effects of eating bran. Growing up, I grew up in a farming community in Wyoming. I'm very familiar with oats, barley, wheat, have been involved in growing all three. What I do know is that there are parts of the plant that you can eat, the grain, the wheat, the barley plant that you can eat. You can eat the seed, of course, which we eat in breads, and stuff like that they make bread out of. You can eat the stem. There's parts of the stem. When I was a kid, I would irrigate the fields. Walking out through the field, a lot of times I'd reach down and grab a stem of oats, and the stem comes apart. It kind of wraps itself around, as it grows, it wraps itself a little higher and a little higher, and it keeps putting out the shoot. Well, if you pull that stem out of the lower portion of the stem, there's a portion of it that's kind of a white, milky look. It's not as green as the rest of the stem. The cool thing is it's a great place to get something that is very thirst satisfying. So you can chew on that and it'll satisfy your thirst. That was something that I grew up around. But also, one of the things that I discovered as a youth, as a child, is, experimenting, is that there's parts of the plant that you cannot eat. And one of the parts that I discovered that you couldn't eat is you cannot eat the husk that surrounds the seed. It kind of has this clinging attribute that clings to the inside of your mouth. And it's sour, it's bitter tasting, and it'll just cling to the inside of your mouth. It's actually kind of hard to get out of your mouth, It takes a little bit of time to get out of your mouth, and usually you have to wash it out with water or, some sort of liquid. What I discovered is that bran, while I thought it was a seed like barley, oats, and wheat, even rice, is a part of the husk that surrounds the seed. So when you separate the seed of grains from the husk that surrounds the grain, as long as it's dried and separated completely, you can store those grains for eons. We actually don't know the length of time that those seeds can be stored. However, if you leave any part of that husk, which includes the bran, any part of that husk is attached to the seed or left in contact with the seed, it will cause the entire batch or stored grain to go rancid. If you Google bran, or at least this is what I discovered is that that's what it said. Now, having grown up on a farm, I realized that you can't eat that husk or any portion of that husk. And it makes no sense to me that we eat it, period. And yet you have products like Raisin Bran. In fact, every bread product that is a product that's made in factories, that you buy off the shelf that I could look at, bran is listed as one of the ingredients. If you look at pastas, the virtually anything that's made out of a grain will tell you that it's got bran in it of some sort. Now, what I discovered in my research that day is that back in the late 1900s, early 1900s, I guess would be the early 1900s, to get my centuries correct here. The late 1800s and early 1900s is when they first started using bran as a filler in bread products. And since then, they've continued to use it as a filler to just add bulk and it's a cheap filler, of course, because normally they would just throw it out. They could cook it in with the bread, and the bread, the pasta, all these different products. And as a result of that, within about 10 years of them first starting to use it as a filler, heart disease started going through the roof. And since then, it has continued to grow, and grow. It didn't make sense when I read all of this that we were using any portion of the husk as any kind of a filler in bread products. And so I immediately that day I threw away the box of Raisin Bran that I'd been eating from, stopped eating bread products completely. In fact, since then I've pretty much cut out all grain products from my diet. And since then, as long as I stay away from those products, I don't have any problems with my blood pressure, with my cholesterol. In fact, I went back in about 45 days after this all occurred, and I hadn't told my doctor that I had not filled the prescription that he'd written. I went in, got my blood tested. We got together and talked about the results, and he said, yeah, everything's looking really good and everything's back to where it was before, we had this little episode. I'm glad you're back on those prescriptions. That's when I finally told him that I wasn't on the prescriptions, that I had believed that I had found the cure to my issues, which happened to do with anything that would have bran as one of the byproducts of its making. So that's just an example of, and I can give you example after example of finding your own cure, treating the problem rather than just treating the symptom, which most medications are designed to do. And quite frankly, this may not be your problem. I have no idea. Every person's body is a little bit different, and how we react and respond to things happens and occurs differently. One person is allergic to, certain flowers or certain tree, tree pollen, different things like that. Another person like me, I'm deathly allergic to bee stings. And yet I have family members that they can get stung by a bee and they don't even have any swelling take place. The key to it is learning how to find and determine what the problem is, the root problem that is causing your health issue. And that is something that over time I've learned to do very effectively. And that's what I'm going to teach you and share with you. In the meantime, I wish you good health and look forward to the next video.